and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning. I hope you are well. For most of this year, I can't believe it's August, but starting at about the beginning of the year, the Thursday study group has been studying and practicing with the precepts. The last thing we were reading was a series of wonderful talks by Suzuki Roshi that he gave in the 1970s. And yeah, they were really great talks. Within our Thursday study group, we have actually 13 people who are, one group is from our Sangha, and then there's also a group from Richmond that are sewing a rakusu and preparing to take the precepts. So I feel like I've been studying and helping these students prepare for lay ordination for the whole year. But early in March, everyone's lives were interrupted. We had to close the zendo for coronavirus and put our sewing on hold. We all became homebound. But after a while, we learned how to hold study classes on Zoom, and we continued to study precepts together until about practice period. Now, being quarantined at home was not really too an abrupt change for me because I work at home, and I'm usually home most of the day. My husband's retired, and he's also home a lot of the time, but he used to go to Carborough 3 days a week and watch our grandchild. So that was nice. During the week, each of us had some of our own space. But suddenly, we were home alone together, really more than we had ever been. And unfortunately, I started to notice pretty often that these big disagreements seemed to pop up out of nowhere over insignificant things. How could that happen after all this time I'd spent studying the precepts? I couldn't figure out how could I get through the day without breaking one. The precepts around speech were the ones that seemed to be being broken the most. I either wasn't recognizing the speech precepts at the time or at a deep enough level, and yet every time I would say something unkind, it seemed obvious that I had just broken one. Of all the precepts, I decided I better focus on the precepts involving speech. Those 3 precepts are: a disciple of Buddha does not speak falsely. A disciple of Buddha does not slander. A disciple of Buddha does not praise self while putting others down. These are very good guidelines, but I had to add one for myself. A disciple of Buddha speaks thoughtfully with kindness. I don't really want my speech to cause harm, but I was falling into that trap easily. Our speech is so deeply rooted in our habits and preconceptions that suddenly I would hear words flying out of my mouth before I even thought about what I wanted to say. And when I heard myself speaking, I could notice when my words or even my tone of voice was unkind or irritated and harmful. And I started getting so frustrated that I just did it again. What happened to all that time studying the precepts? Where was my vow? And most of the time, my unkind words, probably all of the time, were directed to my husband. even though we generally get along pretty well. We have been married 42 years. I think the problem is that we have so many habitual patterns and assumptions ingrained in our interactions that conflict can arise pretty easily. In some ways, being more closely contained in the house since lockdown, it really helped me see and hear myself, and then want to work on my speech, not just for my own state of mind, but for what I'm offering others. Now, we live out in the country, surrounded by woods, beautiful leafy trees and birdsong. I can't blame the stress of living in a big city. The setting is beautiful. So this also made me wonder, how can I lose my composure and get angry so easily? I know I get mentally stressed over finishing my work orders on time and trying to get everything else in the house done. But when I'm stressed, I carry it around all day and into the house. And with both of us being together all day, I realize there are so many more opportunities to decide all these little things like, what are we going to have for lunch today or dinner? I used to be able to just, at least 3 days a week, run into the house, grab a little lunch, and get back to work without having to discuss it. So I continue to notice happening is how easily there was some simple miscommunication over the daily routines, and irritation would arise. Before I could even know it, I hear irritation in my voice, even just answering a simple question. Now, he is hard of hearing, and often I have to repeat myself, and then I start to raise my voice, and then I can start to hear the irritation come along with the words. And it always surprises me. I wasn't mad a second ago. What happened? And then the other thing, at the beginning of lockdown, when he drove us into town for groceries, I would notice he was not taking the route that I would take. And I noticed how the thought would come up with a little reaction. So I used to ask him, why are you going this way? And I could hear a little criticism and irritation. I did this for the first few times, but that attitude I pretty much recognized and managed to let it go pretty easily. When I just realized, well, we're not on a schedule. There's no deadline to get to the store. And what in the world does it matter how we get there? I can enjoy the ride. So if I felt a little reaction, I didn't lose consciousness. I let go of irritation, and I could even laugh at myself. I'm trying to practice letting go of my deadline mind, trying to get things done at a certain minute or hour. That's helped me be able to be a little more present when I go into the house from the studio. If I slow down, I can actually pay attention to what is being asked of me. I've really been trying to work on it. I haven't found a quick fix. I can feel a little progress some days. It is easier to respond than to react when my mind isn't set on the outcome. And I recognize that underlying all these little reactions is that I just want things to be my way. And then I'm not very flexible. The more flexible I can be, I realized, the more smoothly these interactions go. Recently, Josho sent us the 5 conditions of right speech. That was a huge help. I'd forgotten these. The 5 conditions of right speech are: 1, do I speak the truth? 2, Do I speak gently? 3, do my words benefit others? 4, do I speak out of goodwill? 5, do I speak at the proper time and place? Our speech can be very powerful, helpful, or hurtful and misunderstood. In the book Welcoming the Unwelcome, Pema Chodron says, "Speaking from your heart brings us closer together. This comes from seeing that our true state is interconnectedness. Our speech uncovers that interconnectedness instead of reinforcing the misunderstanding that we're separate. On the other hand, if we're looking down on someone, feel threatened or upset, our speech will reflect the polarization that's in our mind." She says, knowing that our speech is unskillful at times and painful and uncomfortable, but if we can sit with this and bear that discomfort, that in itself will help soften our heart. She says, when we speak from our vulnerable good heart, what comes out of our mouth is much more likely to be healing than divisive. I appreciate that. It feels very true to my experience. When I can slow down and feel connected, I can be more open and present when I'm talking and listening. And I'm much more able to respond instead of react. I've also found that taking a few moments to answer can really help. Pema also says, we need discernment to know when it's time to speak and when it's not. We need to look at ourselves closely. What triggers us? What calms our agitated mind? And what pours kerosene on the fire? Sometimes, she says, when a discussion turns into a fight, it's probably better to stop talking and say, we need to talk about this later. This reminds me of one of the 5 conditions for speech. Ask yourself, is this the right time? Pema also says, speaking from the heart does not come automatically. It's actually a skill that we need to work on. We need to keep refining our capacity to speak skillfully year after year for the rest of our lives. This process is trial and error. She says we have to make many mistakes and be willing to learn from them. I like this because she says, look at the whole process as an experiment. Try to come from a place of shared humanity and then experiment by saying something. In that way, you can gradually learn what works and what doesn't. She says learning to speak from the heart is a long journey. Yes, just as I suspected. Retraining my speech is going to take a lot of time and presence. The good news is we can do this forever, growing old together, learning to see ourselves more clearly and to see others. I'm becoming a little more aware that if I'm feeling pressured by a deadline, first I need to settle my mind, and then my words are a lot more likely to be thoughtful and kind. To help my state of mind, I've been allowing a little more time for my work schedule, which I always just make up in my mind. But when I'm rushed, I'm stressed. The work will get done, even if I'm not in a rush. How can I enjoy my state of mind when I'm always stressed? If I don't feel joy or kindness, how can I offer it to others? And I really don't want to live with a self that's mad and irritated, It's not much fun. During the workday, I've started to take little breaks from work, walk out into the garden, see how the tomatoes are doing, see how the zinnias are blooming, or stop by and say hi to the fish, give them a little fish food, or even noticing something in the house that needs a little cleaning and care. This has really helped give me a wider view than just making robes. And it also gives me a break from trying to control everything. Many days, feels like I've only made a little progress staying centered and not getting taken over by my habits. I have vowed over and over again to always speak kindly. I even coach myself. When I leave the studio to go into the house, I remind myself how to behave. Sometimes I remember, but I've been confounded at how quickly and easily I can forget, react, and behave the way I just told myself not to. How does real change arise? Well, Edward Brown speaks to this in his book, The Most Important Point. He says, what is it to be true to yourself? We think the way to go through life is to create a picture of how we should be and then act that out. He asks, how has that been working lately? You put on your best performance, yet something doesn't work. You're doing the best you can. You're trying to be buoyant, cheerful, calm, peaceful. It doesn't work. And if working this way, trying to control your mind, you might get a grip on yourself, but that's not a spiritual life. He says, you can't experience the moment if you try to control your mind. And I would add, if you're stuck in your mind with your thoughts telling you how this moment should be, you will miss the actual moment unfolding and likely be disappointed in how it turns out. I listened to a Dharma talk by Norman Fisher, and one thing he said, he reminded us, instead of trying to become some perfect person who is calm, generous, happy, and smart, practice actually asks you to become your true self. And this reminds me of what I've heard Suzuki Roshi often tell his students. Well, while I've been struggling to be more aware and improve my speech, I've also been searching for a topic for this talk. And then one night, I found a Dharma talk by Charlotte Jakuko Beck called For a More Harmonious Life. Oh my goodness, even seeing the title was encouraging. Jakuko Beck says, we're all here doing Zen practice. The question is, what are we doing? This wonderful life that we're right in the middle of, which is ourselves, is complete and perfect from the very beginning. And all we have to do is just realize it. It's simple. Most of you have heard this many times before, and yet we continue to sit and struggle. Why? She says the reason is that we determine personally to be the center of all this, and we're not. We're in it, but we're not the center. So one way of looking at our practice is to make this multiplicity of little selves that we entertain into a unity. And I thought of all the aspects of myself I'm trying to control and improve, and wondered, well, how do you do that? There's the self that wants to speak kindly, the one that wants to be smart and admired, and the one that still wants to get the work done. All these little selves compete and try to control the situation. So how can I do it? Jakuko says, Shift your life from asking why to how. Why is this multiplicity of little questions we have centered around our little self, such as, why are we here? Why is my life this way? And why is this happening to me? And in other words, why isn't it the way I want it? Shifting to how is simply asking the question, how can I make this life right now harmonious? What can I do in the present moment I'm stuck in? Not why is this happening to me, but how can I create more harmony? The way she turned this question really helped me. I've been trying to figure out the why. I wasn't yet clear how to shift from why to how. Then she offered this wonderful image that clarified my mind. Jakuko said, why is the personal confusion we all have? Each one of us is like a pie, split into all sorts of little selves. Each slice wants something different. There's our greed, our anger, our need to be important, our resentment, our wanting this and that, wanting to be enlightened even, wanting some success of whatever sort. All of these are for each one of us a little pie we're split into, and at different times we're caught in one piece of that pie or another. Well, this image really was an aha moment, and it really hit me hard. And this really, what popped into my head, of course, is my favorite treat, the cherry pie from Weaver Street Market. It is so delicious, fruity, and the crust is so tender. And it came up so vividly in my mind. I could see it. And I felt like I could almost taste it. And maybe that's from quarantine. I don't know. But seriously, the image actually perfectly described my frustration. Oh, I realized, it's all those darn pieces of the whole pie. I can't get all these pieces to behave or work together harmoniously. Why can't I? When I try, it's like trying to herd cats. Or the image of trying to walk 5 dogs on a leash that are all going in different directions. But as Jakuko says, why is the wrong question. I have to move to how. Jakuko says the first step is you have to realize you're caught. Next, you have to really experience it. This is important. Feel the annoyance, anger, resentment, greed, or whatever. And she says this experience is always bodily. It has nothing to do with getting lost in the thoughts in your mind. It's when the problem that we're caught in, which we think is from external factors, actually begins to settle in the body, and we feel it. That's when transformation can begin. It's not the thoughts. It's settling into that direct bodily experience. This is the process of awareness. Pema Chodron says a similar thing in Welcoming the Unwelcome. She says, when we get hooked, when we get really angry, resentful, fearful, or selfish, we start to go a little unconscious. We lose our awareness of what we're doing with our body, speech, and mind. In this state, it's all too easy to let ourselves spiral downward. The first step in pulling yourself up is to notice and acknowledge when you're going unconscious. When any unwanted feeling comes up, feel it as fully as you can in the present moment. Breathe with it. Allow it to touch you, to inhabit you as fully as you currently can. Do this as the feeling gets stronger till it comes so heavy you can hold it in your hand. At that point, grab the feeling. Then open your hand and just let it go. Let it float where it will, out and out into the universe, dispersing into smaller and smaller particles. Pema suggests doing this practice to transform how we react. Not to blame others for making us mad or angry, but to feel our feelings and practice releasing them. Of course, this takes practice. But it reminded me of Suzuki Roshi, pointing to his head and say, move from here, your head, to here, into your body. Our body will always tell us how we're really feeling. That's the starting point for transformation. This is why when my thoughts are on an imagined outcome for a finish line, I'm out of touch with the present. Next, Jakuko says, sooner or later, working like this, we also become really aware about our pie, that my pie and your pie are not much different. Out of this insight, there begins to be some compassion for ourselves and other people. We can have the angriest feelings about someone, but the more we become aware of the total process, our compassion appears and grows. But the compassion will never come for not being really aware of what's going on inside us. We need to practice this self-awareness every day and get in touch with our inner pieces of pie. It has also helped me recognize that the same old pieces of pie are on the plate again. Maybe I just lost my temper again. Jakuko says, willpower in Zen practice is the central resolve which comes out of the multiplicity of ourselves becoming a unity. As we practice, the will gets stronger. Shibayama Roshi, a teacher in the Rinzai lineage, said, it's not easy for anyone to cast away the chain of ignorance and discrimination all at once. A very strong will is required, and one has to search single-heartedly for one's true self within oneself. Hard training is needed in Zen, and it never resorts to an instant easygoing means. We all know this. We're in for the long haul. Not even sitting sesshin fixes everything, but it will help deepen our practice. Actually, I think this is good news. Continuous practice. We're just working on what's right in front of us, moment after moment. What has just arisen? How did I meet it this time? We learn a little bit each time. And the good news is there's not a deadline of a week, a month, or a year to accomplish this. Maybe only our death means that time is up. But we can also do this work with each other as Sangha and let our compassion grow. How wonderful to be learning to see and hear and deepen our knowledge of ourselves and each other. Jakuko says, will comes out of the willingness to face fear and pain. At the bottom of all of our little numbers, all these little pieces of pie, there's fear. We do everything we can not to face it. We cover it up. But when we face all the pieces of our pie, our drives, cruelty, everything inside, out of that comes the will your compassion, and freedom. We have to get to know ourselves more deeply and feel our feelings. And if we don't dwell on judging our bad behavior, but to compassionately say, oh, here I go doing such and such again. I blew it. Why do I do that? And then look and see, where did that habit come from? It takes a lot of patience, but you don't have to eat the whole pie at once. We work on each one of the 10,000 dharmas that come up, one at a time, and face that pain and fear. Jakuko says more about the will. For a Zen student, the problem is, over the years, how do we continue to develop our will? This is what Zen training essentially is. There are, she says, a couple of aspects of will. Will can be very soft, very skillful, very yielding. It doesn't have to be rigid and forceful. When the will is completely developed, we can hold all the parts of ourselves without suppressing anything. I really liked that she pointed out that the will is not the way I usually think of it, as having to be forceful or rigid, but soft and skillful. That seems very useful. She goes on, another aspect of will is intention. It's absolutely basic to our practice. She says some people sit down on their cushion and count their breaths mechanically without really paying attention to the process or putting themselves in it very much. That's not good practice. There has to be behind each breath your intention. It doesn't matter what your practice is. There are many techniques in Zen training, but the most important thing is the foundation, is your intention. The intention to wake up, the intention to train. Our bodhisattva vow is to save all beings. We practice in order to bring everyone to the other shore, to benefit others with the knowledge that we're not separate. We do this by learning what's inside us. What is our deepest wish? For me, now I'm trying to put more focus on my speech, either kind words or at least a neutral tone. One thing that has helped me check my words is to stop trying to be the know-it-all. And if I can be more open-minded and slow down a bit, I'm more likely to actually listen to what is being asked or said. My husband is truly hard of hearing, but I realized I'm hard of listening. I'm trying to remember to keep myself more in the spirit of asking for clarification instead of just reacting. Most of our miscommunication comes from not really knowing what the other person was saying or asking. Jakuko says, over the years, our will, our clarity, our compassion will just naturally grow, and then we'll move from why to how, from multiplicity to unity. Our personal experience and the universal experience will merge. It's not that there's some will outside of yourself, but developing a feeling that you and the universe are one. There's no separation in what you want for yourself and what you want for everything else. The way to accomplish this experience and the stages is to practice continuously through the years. The benefits for ourselves and for everyone else are more than worth it. Thank you very much. May our intention equally extend to every being place. With the true merit of Buddha's way, beings are numberless. I vow to awaken with them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.